Hello, I am back for another round. All right. So we left off. Shoot. We left off where uh, May was invited to a ball, which went great, super great. Totally didn't meet Bo Cleaville. Yes, she did. Um, and now she has gone back to the colony of the undead. Um, what was the last thing? Um, where are they going? I think she's talking about plans. Where I think she's gonna go to Galaxy Golf next. I think that's what they're doing. My mom tagged me in a post. Ooh, I love this. Okay, and let's see. They're trying to find out how to defeat Bo Cleaville. Oh, so yes, hello. Hold on. 100%. Okay, I was gonna say you didn't do the 100, but yes, you did. Okay, so yeah, they're trying to think of ways to defeat Bo Cleaville. All right, so we are chapter. We are at chapter 21. Shoot his ass. Nice. Definitely, that's the way to end Bo Cleaville. Shoot him in the butt. All right. So, oh, didn't want to do that. There we go. So, also, I want to see where I want to read. God, there's so much I want to read. Okay, we'll see how far I go. Because I want to get, and this sounds crazy, but I want to do until 10. But we'll see how tired my voice will be. But yeah, let's get started. Okay. Chapter 21. The free spirits were here. Snicker, snicker, snicker. Flapping his tail, Somberkitty stared up at the spirit who had accosted him. His captor looked to be having quite a laugh. Oh wait, I guess Somberkitty. She's not Somber. What happened to Somberkitty? I know he got taken by the vampire, but then he uh he broke free from the vampire, and then I don't remember what happened after that. Wait. Yeah, I forget where to. Yeah, because the last thing about Somber Kitty is that he, oh, he went inside a cat door. He went inside a cat door. He saw like a horse bone, a horse head bone, and then he saw a cat shaped bone or like doorway, and he went into it. I don't know what happened, what says, what it says after that. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, flapping his tail, Somebody stared up at the spirit who had accosted him. Hold on. I'm sorry. Let me just get something out real quick. Lip balm. Mm. Okay. Flailing his tail, Somberface stared up at the spirit who had accosted him. His captor looked to be having quite a laugh, blowing air through his great nostrils, his big lips almost smiling. The great animal nudged Kitty, as if wanting to play, and let out uh, a whinny. Horses could be so immature. Somber, period, Somber Kitty peered out around. Yeah, Somber Kitty peered around, taking in the scene before him. Rolling hills full of tigers, snakes, bats, cats, armadillos, anteaters, three-toed sloths, dodo birds, dogs. Every animal in the rainbow loped across the green grass, flew across the grass, flew through the blue sky, frolicked all amongst the trees. Somebody was no detective, but something told him this was the realm to which all animals had been banished, and something told him they weren't all having that bad of a time. Somebody gave his whiskers a twitch, stood up, and gave the horse a parting wave of his tail. It was all very lovely, but he had other things to do. Mainly, he had a girl he needed to protect. He was just turning to leave when he saw her. She was gray in a purple collar. Her delicate paws were wrapped were wrapped around a twig, which she had been gnawing on ecstatically while writhing back and forth on her back. She seemed to sense she was being watched, for her ears turned to Kitty. For her ears For her ears turned to Kitty, and then the rest of her did, and she bounced into the air like a super ball and landed on all fours, looking at him, trying to look as smooth as possible. Somber Kitty laid down on his belly and belly crawled toward her. God, I love this book because it's so childish. Meow, he said, which in English means, "Hey, babe, I have somewhere I need to be. Want to come with?" "Mew," she replied, which in English means, "love to." And far from being trapped, the two cats simply trapezed out the way Somber Kitty had come. The Plateau of Despair meditation and yoga retreat for busy goblins. May, Lucius, Pumpkin, and Beatrice stood with their backs against a red brick wall on which these words were announced. staring across the lawn at something they had written in the grass. They couldn't help but admire what they'd done. Do you think we should add Do you think we should add some curly cues? B asked. It could be dressed up a bit. Lucius and May blinked at It could be dressed up a bit. Lucius and May blinked at each other, shaking their heads. Fabio stayed home to play badminton, considering the whole outing useless. Staring at what they'd just done to the lawn of the yoga retreat, May thought he might have a point. Well, she breathed. Let's go. She sneaked into the building through the side door, first going into the locker room. Through a window, they could see several goblins sitting in lotus position in the room beyond them, their eyes closed. On the far wall was a sign. Mantra. When I get tired of terrorizing others, there's a place I can go to recharge. They rolled their eyes at one another and they sneaked onward, arriving at a room where the goblins had hung their slimy clothes. Lucius opened a couple of the washing machines and began mixing lights and darks. Beatrice went to work, putting globs of ectoplasm and the rows of designer shoes, grimacing as the slimy goo at the slimy goo. Pumpkin hovered near the door, nibbling his long white fingers and ready to escape at any moment. May found a stash of shoe polish and hurried to the showers to mix it up with the goblin shampoo. While she was busy with that, Lucius drifted past, holding his nose and wincing, his arms full of underwear. Noticing May's boggled look, he motioned for her to follow him to the kitchen, then to a giant silver refrigerator against the far wall. The room was lined with kegs labeled organic gutter grass juice. Can you open the freezer for me? Can you open the freezer for me? Lucius whispered. May had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing as they shoved pile after pile of goblin underwear into the freezer. Lucius waved a pair of underwear at her threateningly. She wrangled another pair back at him. They burst into an underwear sword fight, dodging left and right, cutting capers. Yeah, what? Come on. Yeah, cutting capers, waving the underwear behind their backs and through their legs, dashing at each other like swordsmen. Fear the undies, Lucia said. Never! May hissed back. May hissed back, throwing her underwear so that it landed square on his head. Really, you two? They both turned to see Beatrice in the doorway, frowning sternly. If the goblins catch us. Pumpkin was standing by one of the organic cut grass juice urns, trying to pour himself a glass. He kept tilting the urn farther forward, finally sticking his mouth under the tap. The three turned to watch him and realized a moment too late what was about to happen. The urn reached its tipping point, and suddenly it came crashing down, dousing Pumpkin in green, glowing juice and rolling across the floor. A moment later, a figure appeared behind Bee in the doorway. May and Lucius noticed it first, and then, seeing their eyes, Beatrice's own widened in fright, and she swiveled, coming face to face with a fearsome goblin, about half her size but with razor-sharp teeth that took up most of his entire face. He was also wearing a turban and ballet pants. Ah! Oh, you said something. Gross, that's where goblin swamp ass gathers. Were you referring to what the sign said? Or what were you referring to? To the goblin meditation thing? Yeah, oh yeah, don't play with goblin underwear. Yeah, pretty gross. That's how you get sick. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Um, they all turned and ran for the back kitchen door, knocking aside big kegs of orange gut grass. Oh, orange gut grass. Oh, no, or organic gut grass. Okay, there we go. Yeah, knocking aside big kegs of organic gut grass juice in their wake, and burst onto the front lawn and zipping off into the mite, laughing madly. Behind them, they left a chaotic scene of goblins screaming and screeching to find their lights and darks had all turned the same shade of pink, and a reminder blazing out and a reminder blazing on the front lawn. The free spirits were here. That underwear idea of mine was good, Lucius said, grinning from ear to ear. He picked a nightshade flower that happened to be growing near where his feet landed and handed it to May. Pumpkin let out a tiny growl, as if almost like he was clearing his throat. May took the flower and twined it about her bow, about and twined it about her bowstring, looking at Pumpkin curiously, then back at Lucius. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was, she said, like a mother would say to a child, exchanging a grin with Beatrice. I outdo myself sometimes, he said, reaching down for another flower and handing it back to her. This one May tucked behind her ear. A moment later, Pumpkin's long white hand appeared in the corner of her eye as he plucked the flower from her ear and tucked it behind his own, scowling at Lucius's back. I'm glad you died at 13. Yeah, I'm glad you died at 13, May. Now we'll be the same age forever. Pumpkin wagged his head back and forth and made kissy faces at May behind Lucius's back. May gave him a pinch. Beatrice squeezed May's hand and smiled sympathetically. I nearly swooned when I saw that goblin. She breathed. Race you to the abandoned hearse, Lucius said, punching May's arms and zipping past. She gave chase, feeling utterly free. She was the first to slam her hand on the hearse, and Lucius collapsed on the sand, grinning. Unlike the boys at Hogwallow Middle, he looked happy that May had won. Faster than a speeding bullet, he said. Pumpkin drifted past them onto the and onto the colony, his nose up in the air. Bee drifted along behind him, no doubt off to do laundry. May May rushed to May rushed to catch up, eager to see if they'd received any message from the lady. uh, any day now, she would send for them. Any day, they'd know why it was taking her so long. Two cats, one fluffy and gray, one hairless and rather ugly, slowly made their way west across the Nothing Plateau. Somberkitty's companion had introduced herself as Mew, which Somberkitty interpreted as pretty fluffy face. While he stalked along the sand curiously, she zipped in circles around him, tackling him by the neck, nibbling on his ears, and generally trying to remind him to lighten up. However, they both had the same reaction when they came upon a stone structure buried in sand. Its crooked and sunken doorway was strung with cobwebs, concealing the darkness within. Uh, it seemed to shout that here lay certain danger. If either of them had been familiar with Egyptology, they would have recognized it for what it was, an ancient tomb. It looked so unquestionably forbidding that the cats, one look at each other, padded up for a closer look. Tails stiff and ears swiveling like satellites, they trapezed down the stairs into the darkness, full of delight. Somewhere far below, in the belly of the tomb, there was a groan. They hurried forward to investigate. And that is the end of that chapter 21. On to chapter 22. Yep, chapter 22. Meatballs of Fire. May sat with her chin in her hands, staring at the window at thousands of hot fiery balls zooming out of the sky and landing with great thwacks against the Nothing Plateau, sending up clouds of sand and fire into the dark as far as the eye could see. For 2 weeks, they'd been playing pranks on all over the Northern Realm, but they'd been trapped inside for the past 3 days. It's meteor showering cats and dogs, Beatrice said with a sigh. They were all lounging in May's room, a circular cave-like affair tucked up in one of the high corners of the Scrap Mountains, with a breathtaking view of uh, the plateau. Um, Beatrice sat up, perched on the arm of May's moldy, busted easy chair, braiding May's long hair over and over. Lucius lay on the floor, his hands beneath his head, wiggling his heels restlessly. Fabio sat on the edge of May's bed, composing a poem he had announced that was called Meatballs of Fire. Yeah, May murmured, thinking of Somberkitty. She hadn't known were such things as meteor showers in the ever after, but apparently there were, and apparently it was very dangerous to go out in them unless you had a really good umbrella. She hoped Kitty was somewhere safe. Woohoo! The sound had come from down the hall. A moment later, Pumpkin appeared, carrying a newspaper in his hands. Look what just came back from the telebooth! We're famous! Let's see it, Pumpkin. Uh, Lucius reached out for the paper, but Pumpkin held it back and gave Lucius a sniffy look. May and I would like to look at it first, he said, looking Lucius up and down, then grabbing May by the shroud and pulling her aside so they can lean over the and so they could lean over the paper. Oh. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's what white people do in movies. They want to check stuff out. Hear a scary thing? Why don't we just check it out? There we go. Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, exactly. Alright. I wonder what I'll get famous for next, Pumpkin said. Wave of banditry strikes northeast. Ghouls, goblins, and zombies in the northeastern territories were disturbed by a rash of bizarre incidents this week. Sometime in the wee hours of Tuesday night, a giant billboard of Bo Cleaville, the Rum's ruler, was vandalized, as discovered the following morning by a group of goblins returning from the Glammy Guts Mall in Grief Glen. The vandals had drawn a curly mustache on the obscured face of Bo Cleaville, along with boogers coming out of his nose. In Upper Transylvania on Wednesday, a 12-pack of Slurpee soda cans exploded when a pack of ghouls tried to drink them. Later that afternoon, the same ghouls found "You Smell" painted across their windshield. Arguments have since broken about what Arguments have since broken out about exactly which goal the "You Smell" was directed at, and what exactly they are alleged to smell like. And on Thursday, a horde of zombies was stopped dead in its tracks. No, it was spelt with the YOU. Dang kids. Yeah. And on Thursday, a horde of zombies was stopped dead in its tracks when a tall man in a curly mustache began dancing in front of them, saying, "That's amore." Some hobgoblins tried to give chase, only to find that their shoelaces had been tied together. They lay helpless for several hours while waiting for someone to arrive who knew how to untie shoes. On a more serious note, countless spears and arrows had been reported missing from the Grim Reaper supply shop outside the shattered remains of Hocus Pocus. Several specters we interviewed Friday outside uh, Several specters we interviewed Friday outside Glammy Guts claimed to be amused by the pranks, and anonymous guillotine sources in Porto Town, fearless of losing their heads because they already have, say that it's about time somebody in the after showed a little chutzpah. No matter who the pranksters are or what their motivations might be, spirits all over the realm have begun to look to the northeast with anticipation, wondering what may happen next. "It's brought a little light into our afterlives," one anonymous spirit said, "knowing that someone is out there, bucking the system. Someone, indeed, but who?" Fabio stood up and, seeming suddenly inspired, zipped off down the hallway. "I told you we were good," Lucius said, folding his hands behind his head. Mate turned to look out the window again, at the meteor shower. "I don't know." "What's not to know?" Pumpkin said, flopping onto the arm of May's chair and swinging his legs. "The truth is, I just can't not be famous, no matter how hard I try." May couldn't help feel May couldn't help feeling annoyed at Pumpkin, seeing his glee and Lucius's self-congratulatory smile. She felt like she was the only one in the room who remembered why they were here in the first place. Only Beatrice seemed to be listening seriously. Go on, May. What do you mean? She asked, leaning forward. Well, we've just been. We've. Well, we've just pulled some pranks. That's all. We haven't saved anybody. We haven't done anything important. Beatrice nodded. Yes, I suppose that sounds. Yes, I suppose it sounds that way. But look, it says right here we're making a difference. Here, the part about bringing light into their afterlives. But that won't save Somber Kitty, May argued, frustrated. Or save the realm, or... She was interrupted by the curious sight of Fabio rushing back through the doorway, his arms full of papers. He dumped them into May's lap. I'm thinking now that we are famous, it is time. Time for what? Mace asked, gazing at the papers, confused. Time to submit some of my work to be published, you see? He said, shuffling through his papers. Poems, screenplays, novels, I do it all. I shall read you one of my poems now. It is called I Am So Talented I Make Myself Cry. Oh, Pumpkin cooed, picking up a screenplay titled in glowing letters across the font. Stone Toe, an autobiography. um, have you started casting for this yet? A delighted smile came over his face. You should cast me, Lucius said, standing up and puffing out his chest. Did you see me when those gulls were chasing us? Quick as a flash, tough as his blue eyes sparkled. Something really tough. Something really tough? He grinned proudly. Beatrice laughed and clapped. May felt her impatience reach a fever pitch. She stood up, dumping Fabio's papers off her lap, and reached for her bow and quiver. Everyone stopped in the middle of what they were doing to look at her. Where are you off to all of a sudden? Lucius asked. The grin was still playing on his lips. We're not going to get anything done without the lady, May said, slinging the quiver over her back in a passion. I'm going to get her. But May, Beatrice insisted. The petrified pass. Bertha said. Something could happen to you. It was Pumpkin who'd spoken, his fingers in his mouth, suddenly as worried as he had been delighted a moment before. But it was too late. May was too angry to stop being angry. Why don't you go back to reading Stone Toe? May spat. Since all you care about is being famous. Hey, that's uncalled for. Lucius interrupted, but May ignored him. She was impossibly angry at Pumpkin, and she didn't even know why. Maybe it was because he didn't argue with her. He only looked shattered. I'll come with you, he offered. He offered finally. His kindness filled her with shame, and that only made her angrier. You're the one who always gets us caught, Pumpkin. I'm safer without you. As soon as the words were out, May wished for all the world she could take them back. Pumpkin looked down at his fingers. His white cheeks turned rosy red. The others stared, mouths agape. Fabio cleared his throat. Bee tugged at her sash. Lucius glowered, but it couldn't make May feel worse than she already did. She turned to leave. May, please don't go, Beatrice said. I'm dead anyway. She shot back. What's the worst that could happen? Seconds later, she was charging out into the storm. Somber Kitty and the cat, known as Pretty Fluffy Face, knew they'd made a mistake the minute they noticed the groaning, which here theretofore here wait, I need to look up that word because I don't know how to pronounce it. It's one of those like three words combined into one. Here to come on. Oh, not that one. Heretofore. There we go. Uh, which heretofore had been somewhere up ahead in the darkness, began to come. Here, let me read that again. Summer Kitty and the cat, known as Pretty Fluffy Face, knew they'd made a mistake the minute they noticed that the groaning, which heretofore had been somewhere up ahead in the darkness, began to come from directly behind them, and then a moment later, all around them. They scanned the darkness of the tomb with their keen eyes, seeing nothing but walls. And then they saw the movement. Figures that at first had seemed to be only paintings detaching themselves from the wall, their arms held aloft, reaching, grasping. Oh, I'd like to imagine it's like that scene from The Mummy, where like the paintings, or the paintings, or like the carving of like the Egyptians. That's what I imagine it. If you've ever seen the Mummy, but that's what I imagine what it looks like. Yeah. All right. The mummies lurched forward. The mummies lurched towards the cats, closing in on them from all sides. Summer Kitty leaped in front of the pretty. Uh, Summer Kitty leaped in front of Pretty Fluffy Face and let out a low growl, his tail standing warningly. As one money, uh, as one mummy hand reached for him, he bit it as hard as he could, but the hand only reached around his middle, and grasped him tight. Somebody tried to leap away, yet pulling at the mummy's gauze as he did, it came away with his teeth, a long thread of a long thread unraveling from around the mummy's thumb, leaving nothing behind. Where the mummy had been a moment before, there was only thin air. Somebody looked down at Pretty Fluffy Face. He was watching raptly as two mummies crept up behind her. Uh, the circle of mummies grew tighter, closing in, until the cats lost sight of each other completely. And that is the end of chapter 22. All right, chapter 23. Hold on, let me get some water. I'm making good progress, I think. Because goddamn, I do want to get done with this book, but like, man, okay, so I'm at 166 right now, and the book ends at 244. So that means we have. I can't do math right now. I know it's less than 100 pages. And I'm just like, man, that's scary. Yeah, we have 78 more pages to go. 78 more pages. I think that's wild. All right. So, chapter 23. Chapter 23. Back to North Farm. That night, not long after she left, May, having dodged her way across the Nothing Plateau, nearly being squashed by several meteors, found a cave in which to take shelter. She curled up in the ratty blanket she'd brought and watched the meteors fall, the fires bathing her in a warm glow. She seethed with she seethed with shame. She kept thinking of Pumpkin's face when she had said the things she had, and she kept thinking about of how she kept thinking of how worried they must be about her, and how terrible she had probably made them feel. After a long while, May unfurled herself onto her back, staring at the darkness of the cave ceiling above. She remembered nights lying awake in her bed back home, studying the ceiling, the sound of the TV down the hall, the comforting knowledge that her mom was there, still awake. Did some souls really lose the place they belonged to? Had Bo Cleaville been right? May certainly felt lost in space. She hoped that, like the last time, the lady could show her the way. The following day, May trekked across the rocky lowlands for seemingly endless hours. She found herself humming one of Pumpkin's silly songs, then thinking of Fabio's poetry and wishing she could hear some of it, terrible as it was. She kept her eyes trained on the shadowy mountains ahead, which seemed like they were never going to get any closer. That they'd never get any closer. But finally, the land began to rise, and up ahead she could see the dim evening light glinting off the giant bones that littered the petrified pass. After another hour or so, she approached the giant stone that marked the edge of the pass. It was broken in two, the engraved words on its surface sliced down the middle. Here lies the frost giants, and here they stood. They were believed into life and then forgotten. Now only their lonely breath drifts upon the mountains and guards the way with fear. May looked up into the snowy mountains, crossing her arms over herself, and then she realized that she wasn't cold at all. The frigid breath of the mountains that had so shrouded her and her friends the last time she had come no longer affected her. The bones of the giants, which had so ter- which had so terrified them, now looked pitiful and defeated where they lay strewn across the rocky hills, though May couldn't exactly put her finger on why. Something wasn't right. She looked back over her shoulder, stroking her long black ponytail thoughtfully, wondering if wondering if maybe it had been a mistake at all. Uh, and wondering if it had been a mistake to come after all. But she couldn't face going back to the colony empty handed. She set her chin and pushed forward, and pushed onward. She spent that night camped in a nook about 2 hours' distance from the top of the rise, watching for ghost lights dancing among the shadows, but seeing nothing except the dark. She tried to ignore the unease. Hold on. Sorry for that, you guys. My dog was running around like a crazy happy chicken, and I wanted to see it. Now we will get back to our regularly scheduled program. Okay. Um. Yeah, she spent that night camped in a nook for about 2 hours distance from the top of the rise, watching for ghost lights dancing among the shadows, but seeing but seeing nothing except the dark. She tried to ignore the unease that enveloped her. There was no sign of the tunnels she'd stumbled into before. The mountain was lifeless and still. Her fears were confirmed when she crested the rise. Hold on. Now, when she crested the rise late the next morning, what she saw on the other side made her ghostly heart stand still. In the valley below, where there had once been a primeval, prim, primeval, yeah, primeval or primeval. Also, Junior sent me a snapshot. I think it's gonna be of his cat. Yep, it's of his cat. Cute. All right. Oh wait, I wanted to see how to say that word. Uh, primeval.
Primeval.
Primeval. Okay, primeval. Junior sent me a snap. She's a menace. Okay. Yeah. Her fears were confirmed when, oh no, in the valley below, where there had once been a primeval forest. There we go. Uh, yeah, in the valley below, where there had once been a primeval forest, its canopy dusted with snow, but brimming with life underneath. lay a graveyard of chopped and decayed wood. Not a tree that had been standing, not a tree had been left standing. The tangled vines and fireflies and filmy animals and glowing North Farm spirits were gone. Now May drifted down into the valley slowly, as if in a dream. She drifted past a sign, now crooked and cracked, announcing Wild and Woolly North Farm, into what had been the heart of North Farm. All around her was evidence of its previous inhabitants, fine spinning looms, whetting stones, and forges, all things all things the spirits all the things the spirits had used to make the finest handcrafted products in the ever after. And then she came to a great tangle of roots, 10 stories high or more, and grass, and gasped. It was the lady's magnolia tree. May crawled over. May crawled over and around each limb, getting covered with mud, searching for something the lady might have left, some sign that she might be somewhere, might still be all right. There was nothing. Just the lady's old photos, a broken table where they once sat together, a handful of red magnolia seeds, and a glowing sign sticking up from the dirt. Coming soon! Cleveland Mall and Multiplex. 18-screen theater with special goblin seating. 300 stores to choose from, all selling mostly the same things. Tree Museum, Poltergeist Aquarium, Food Court. May sank onto one of the limbs, her strength disappearing. A stray lightning bug flitted across her vision. She watched it buzz away. She didn't know how long she sat there, but finally she stood up, ran her hands through her hair, then snuck her hands into her pockets. She wished there was something for her to bring back the colony of the undead. Let me say that again. I said that wrong. She wished there was something for her to bring back to the colony of the undead, but there was nothing left of the heart of the ever after. In the desert, one last groaning voice issued from deep within a buried tomb, and then went silent. Sam blew across the tomb door, shaking the cobwebs. All went back to how it had. Let me say that again. In the desert, one last groaning voice issued from deep within a buried tomb, and then went silent. Sand blew across the tomb door, shaking the cobwebs. All went back to how it had been, as if nothing had happened there at all. And that is the end of chapter 23. Now we will go to chapter 24. Chapter. Hold on. Let me just respond to this. Okay. Yeah, chapter 24. Galaxy Golf. Galaxy Golf. May's mind was full of many things, and she was hardly aware she was drifting at all. After hours of wandering, she found herself at the edge of what must be the Galaxy Gulf. It looked like the Grand Canyon, only instead of a bottom, there was endless space. May stood at the edge, kicking some sand and watching it plummet down into the emptiness. Why did it have to be her, standing here with the weight of the world on her shoulders? Why couldn't she be Claire Arnerson, comfier in her bed? Why couldn't she be just an average school dog vendor in Stabby Eye? Why couldn't she be the old May, who never knew there was so much danger in the world? She ran her hands through her hair. Hold on. she she ran her hands through her hair, and the fingers of her right hand happening to brush something stuck there. She pulled it out and sat down, swinging her legs over the edge of the canyon. It was a red it was a red magnolia seed. She dropped it beside her. Finally, she stood up. She took one last woozy look into the depths of the canyon, and then she turned back in the direction she'd come. Oh my god, Chandler. I knew you were gonna say something. I just knew it. Oh my god. Oh my god, Chandler. You really have to be this way, don't you? Like, actually, though. Okay. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see that comment. Okay. Yeah. Uh, a rattling caught a rattling behind her caught her by surprise, and she whipped around. The seed had sprouted, and before her eyes, in seconds, it grew into a small tree. But the tree swiveled as if it but the tree swiveled as if to look at her, and May saw that it wasn't a tree at all, but the lady herself, lined like lined like a piece of old wood. May stood transfixed, scared to believe what she was seeing. The lady tree blew in the breeze, in the breeze. Her limbs gestured to May. Hi, hi, she said. Remember me? She reached out toward May. She looked so delicate, as if she might break, that May was so scared to touch her. Oh, I'm not that old. Come on now. May reached out one hand, and then the lady's dry, brittle hand touched hers. She knew it was real. You look breakable, she breathed. I'm always breakable, the lady sighed. Sometimes it's just more obvious than others. Why didn't you stop them? May asked. It was the first thing that came into her head. The lady looked at her like she'd asked the simplest question in the world. Why, stopping them's not up to me, my dear. May slots circled May slots circled around her head and tied themselves into knots so that she couldn't say anything in reply. The lady seemed unfazed. Personally, I just like to go with the flow, she said. May opened and closed her mouth, but she was speechless. Want to see something? Without waiting for an answer, the lady reached out her hand and pulled May to the edge of the cliff. She nodded out beyond the edge. Let's go then. May stared at the great emptiness beyond the cliff's edge. You want me to walk out there? The lady blinked at her for a moment, and then the lady blinked at her for a moment, and then her wrinkled face lit up with recognition. Oh, yes, you're right. She held out her hand, where a tiny white sticker had materialized. The sticker said, Hello, my name is, and then May, in glowing, stripy letters. Above these words, it said, Guest VIP Tour of the Galaxy. Having a proper pass is one of the rules of the universe. You're absolutely right to want to stick to protocol. The lady smiled. Well, better hurry up if you want to see. You haven't got much time. She waved May forward. May peered out over the ledge again, into the great star-filled abyss there. See what? She asked. Why, everything, the lady said, looking short on patience. Why, everything, the lady said, looking short on patience. Her eyes growing panther sharp as she reached out her wrinkly hand. May swallowed. Half regretting it already, she reached out for the lady's hand. She took a step, and then she was floating on thin air, with nothing underneath her but stars. She felt as light and aimless as a balloon. She smiled a breathless smile. Right then, she said, the lady said, her roots trailing behind her like the train of a bridal gown. She too drifted out over the edge, and then they were floating down into the gulf, down, down, and then out underneath, into open space. May looked behind her. She could see the ever after, a dim, round sphere of gas behind them. As they drifted away, it became smaller and smaller. Now, if you look to your left, the lady behaved like the perfect tour guide, speaking mechanically, as if she had, as if, let me, sorry, I'm just adjusting. The lady behaved like the perfect tour guide, speaking mechanically, as if she had done it 1,000 times. She pointed out supernovas, comets, planets, nebulae, alien truck stops, the best planets to go for live music, some random bundles of space trash, a few satellites, and several black holes. Which one's the sun? May asked, gazing about all the stars. The lady grinned a wooden smile at her. May pictured, for a moment, how odd they would look to someone watching from Earth. A tree and a girl, floating through space. Earth's sun? May nodded. The lady pointed to a tiny pin dot. May wondered how she could possibly know. And which one's the Earth? The lady pointed to another pin dot. It didn't look like anything May knew. It didn't look big enough to hold all the people and animals and feelings that filled it up. So tiny, and everyone gets so worked up about things, the lady said, tisking. May nodded. But there's love there. That's true. Love is bigger than it looks. May stared at the earth. It was so impossibly far away. God, I feel small. You're feeling small right now? Yeah, that's why I'm not necessarily. Well, no, maybe I am scared of death, but I don't want to admit it. But I'm scared of what happens after we die. Is it just oblivion, or is there an actual heaven or somewhere we go? That shit gets me all the time. I'm just like, oh my goodness. Right? We are so tiny. We're not even specks of dust. We're not even dust. Not even one goddamn speck of a dust. We're just nothing. Oblivion, the video game. Anyways, May stared at the earth. It was so impossibly far away. Her eyes began to well up with tears. Now, the lady frowned and shoved a crisp white hanky into her hand. No use crying over spilled milk. If you waste your time crying over where you used to be, you'll miss all the good things happening around you. Like, for instance, a VIP tour of the galaxy. Plus, feeling sorry for yourself never helped anybody. You've done you've done that a great deal too much recently, my dear. Wish I do forget you. Oh my god, hell yeah. If the afterlife was just Shrek 2 for GameCube, I think I'd be alright. Except for some levels that are just like pretty hard. Hell yeah. Yeah, yeah, I guess so. May thought May thought about her poor behavior back at the colony of the undead, and was filled again with shame. She wondered if Pumpkin would ever forgive her. They floated past clouds of bright cosmic dust that filled May with wonder, and stars that burned so brightly she had to look away. They floated for several more minutes, and just when May thought they were billions of light years from the ever after, it was looming toward them, getting larger and larger. She could recognize it by the big billboard proclaiming Bo Clevel's number one that hovered just in front of it, blinking with a neon glow. The rest of the star was trapped in shade. It's so dark. It's lost its heart. It's empty. That's all. They landed gently, hovering just above the ground. May waited for the lady to say something, hoping desperately that it wasn't time for goodbye. She had so many questions. She had so much more to say. I'm not very good at being a spirit, May said. The lady smiled. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah. I'm not very good at being a spirit, May said. The lady smiled. But I'm not sure I was very good at being a girl either. You were, May. The thing is, if one's going to be alive, one's got to commit to it 100%. Be there all the way. Let it all hang out. All that kind of stuff. Otherwise, what fun is it? May had no answer. May had no answer for that. Now that she was stuck in the world of ghosts, she wished she'd lived a little more, been braver, found where she fit. Oh, it's charming, the ever after. Or it was, said the lady, casting a glance into the gulf. The pit of despair, the colorful spirits and specters, the comfort of things being the same year after year. After all. But Earth, she sighed. Earth is special. Suddenly, from somewhere behind May, there was a giant clap of thunder, and then a gleaming white light. Oh, it's arrived. Oh, it's arrived, the lady said as May swirled around. A bridge stood before her, glowing and covered with fireflies, leading up into the sky. The edge of it disappeared into the darkness above. Is that? Of course. May walked up to its edge, her long hair tangling around her neck, reaching out gingerly to touch its rails, then looking at the lady dubiously. Why is it here? Why is it here? She worried, suddenly that one of them was going to be taken across. Yeah, she worried, suddenly, that one of them was going to be taken across. I wanted you to see it. What's beyond there? I don't know. Nobody has ever come back. The bridge seemed to stretch right into the dark sky above, and May realized, staring into that darkness, what had intrigued her most about the Bridge of Souls. She looked back over her shoulder at the lady. Do you think I would never be afraid there? Yes. Yes, I do. I I think you would never be afraid there. May looked toward the edge. She reached out her hand again to the railing. Seems like a good chance to run away from it all, doesn't it? May looked at her. She lifted one foot and put it on the first step of the bridge. She thought for a long time, and then with a feeling of sadness, she pulled her foot back. A few minutes later, they stood in the dark. They stood in the dark on the edge of the Nothing Plateau, talking quietly. Sorry. A few minutes later, They stood in the dark on the edge of the Nothing Plateau, talking quietly. You won't stay with us? It isn't my fight, but I'll be around, in my way. Do you think I could do it? Do you think I can do what the book said? The lady stared at her a long moment, then sighed. May, I am as old as time itself. I don't think I know. She looked torn. And I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings as much as the next person. Her blue eyes grew wide, deep as pools. May, you will fail. May was so stunned, she floated backward. How can you say that? The lady shrugged her limbs, looking sympathetic but not crushed. It's the truth. So you're saying I should give up? The lady clicked her tongue and shook her leafy head. Knowing you will lose is no reason to give up, my dear. Rip Maybird. Twice. Twice. Yeah, where was I? Knowing you will lose is no reason to give up. Dear me. Now, I have a speaking engagement in the Black Eye Galaxy, and I need to get back to it. So if you'll excuse me. May wanted to May wanted to beg the lady for help, but she didn't. She lifted her chin, trying to look courageous. The lady bustled away a few feet, then happened to turn back and, seeing May's expression, seemed to think better of it. She folded her leaves thoughtfully in front of her. Don't worry, May. There are still a few nice surprises in store for you. She smiled, as if nothing in the world were wrong at all. And then she crumpled up like dirt and blew away. Galaxy Gulf was far behind her when the first silhouettes of the Scrap Mountains came into view. May could see right away that something wasn't quite right. Every window, normally dark with camouflage, was alight with an unmistakable yellow glow, and up on the roof stood a gaggle of ominous-looking figures. Not live ones, but glowing, ghostly, dead. She began to run. And that is the end of chapter 24. All right. It's actually starting to pick up. Like, or, I wouldn't say pretty close, but we're like maybe 30 pages from uh, the third part, which is the last part. And so I'm just like, should I read those? Should I read until there? And I'm figuring I have enough time, so I might just do that. So yeah, it's all working according to plan. All according to cake. Oh man, I want cake. Cake sounds good. All right, so chapter 25. Chapter 25, a special delivery. May had her arrows strung and ready when she burst through the secret door into the main hall of the colony of the undead. Her first thought was how many dark spirits were there. Her second thought was that they didn't quite look like dark spirits. Then she realized that they weren't dark spirits at all. May lowered her arrows, bewildered. Nice of you to drop in, Pumpkin said, drifting past, his arm looped through the arm of a specter in a toga. May peered about. The cavern was full of spirits. A horde of luminous boys gathered in a circle getting instructions from Lucius. Several spirits she recognized from horrific hamburgers at the Pit of Despair. Some ancient Egyptians, ghosts of various shapes and sizes with bulging eyeballs or horns or gooey drippy tails. Even a handful of North Farm spirits, brightly lit, um, even a handful of North Farm spirits, brightly lit, um, their comet like tails drifting behind them as they floated in circles. What? May! Beatrice appeared, beaming, and wrapped her in a hug. Isn't it wonderful? May stared at her, dumbfounded. They've all come to help. Everyone wants to join the Free Spirits. They said they were inspired since we've made Bo Cleavel look less fearsome. They've actually started to believe we can win. May couldn't believe it. A feeling of hope began to flood her soul. She clutched Bee's hand. Crash! Crash! At a moment, the western wall of the hall came crashing in, junk flying everywhere. Several spirits in the hall screamed. Those who didn't those who didn't pulled back in shock. Whatever had come in from whatever had come in with the rubble landed in a heap. Where was I? Oh yeah. Whatever had come in with the rubble landed in a heap, and a moment later. Okay, I was reading that wrong. Whatever had come in the rubble landed in a heap, and a moment later began to move. A gasp went around the room. Hubcaps went spinning across the floor as several figures emerged from the debris. A girl with alligator scars, several boys wearing war paint and feathers in their hair, and one boy in particular in a pair of colorful tropical shorts with sparkling eyes and zinc across his nose. He looked around, nodding, as if satisfied. A bright orange parachute was strapped to his back. He held a square white box marked with a skull and crossbones, and the words Scalini and the word Scalini's aloft in one hand. Hot, white, delicious smelling steam. Yeah, hot, white, delicious steam. No, hot, white, delicious smelling steam poured from its sides. Dudes, Zero said, ruffling his hair casually and shaking it out. We heard you're saving the world? He nodded gamely. Who wants pizza? The spirits of Risk Falls had arrived. When the time comes, we'll reach the plateau of despair. This we'll reach the plateau of despair this way, Bertha said, her grimy hands holding a map of Ever After, pinned to the table of the main hall. A small group of spirits, including Lucius Pumpkin and Lawless Laxey, sat around, listening raptly. If, once we get to the fortress, she went on, we'll need to wait until the dark spirits start leaving before we do anything, May said, anticipating Bertha's words. For 2 weeks they had been planning and replanning, thinking and rethinking their approach to Bo Clevel's fortress. There were so many unknowns. No one knew exactly what the castle was like, even though Beatrice had read everything she could find on the subject. No one knew how exactly they were going to get inside. What they did know was that when Bo Clevel's grip on the Ever After was complete, he would be sending a host of dark spirits all over the realm to take up their malicious lives in the Clevelvilles, and that meant that, while still impossibly strong, his defenses would be weaker than usual. It would also it also meant oh I don't know why you're imagining that either. Yeah, I don't know why you're imagining being played by Keanu Reeves. I think that's hilarious. That is so funny. And I'm just like, why does your, how is your brain working like that? By Keanu Reeves. Ah, that's great. Okay. Um, okay. Yeah. And that meant that, while still impossibly strong, his defenses would be weaker than usual. It also meant that the best time to strike was also the time when the Earth would be in the most possible danger. May hated to wait that long, and as long as Kitty was still out there, her sense of urgency would be double. Being patient was as hard as anything she'd ever done, but she knew it was their only chance. As the weeks had passed, the numbers of free spirits hiding at the colony had grown. Peering around the main hall, she could see Zero explaining to a group of new Egyptians, some ancient Greeks, and a group of belly dancers how to put a goal in a headlock. Fabio was running a ragtag group of ghosts through the undead's obstacle course. Beatrice was teaching a group of risk followers how to be discreet. May stood up. I need to go think for a while, she said, moving to leave. I'll come with you, said Lucius. I'll come with you. Pumpkin leaped. I'll come with you. Pumpkin leaped from his chair and squeezed between Lucius and May, narrowing his eyes at Lucius. May flashed Lucius an apologetic smile, then floated down the hallway with Pumpkin. Once they got to May's room, she flopped into the rickety easy chair by the window and stared out at the desert thoughtfully. Pumpkin flopped on her bed, started playing finger puppets, making one May and one Lucius. I'm so great, he had the Lucius finger puppet say. Oh, Lucius, you're so right, the May finger puppet said. You're totally my hero. Pumpkin? May asked curiously. Why are you so mean to Lucius? Pumpkin yawned. You and he seem to be awfully chummy these days, he said, picking invisible lint out of his tuft of hair. May didn't respond. She guessed they were sort of chummy. So I guess now he's your best friend all of a sudden, Pumpkin went on. May turned to him, surprised. Pumpkin, how can you say that? Pumpkin frowned at her and dropped his finger puppets into regular hands. Tell me the truth. Do you like him better than me? May didn't know how to explain. How to explain. You ass. True. May didn't know how to explain. No, of course not. I just like him. Different. She didn't know how she liked Lucius. Being a being a baby again. He's just a little jealous. Let him be jealous. It's normal. Fucking Pumpkin would die for her. He almost got killed like a bunch of times trying to save her ass. And he's been with her since she was born. He's gonna chill. I guess you have a point there. She didn't know how she liked Lucius. Hmm. Uh. Hmm. Pumpkin said. May opened her mouth to say more when a noise from downstairs distracted them both. Giving each other a look, they shot up and hurried through the junk-lined tunnels to the main hall, where a group of specters were gathered in a circle, talking loudly and agitatedly. What is it? May asked, suddenly worried. Someone, sh- someone shoved a paper into her hands. It came in the telebooth, said Lawless Lexi, giving her a grave look. May looked down at the headlines. A picture of a burning mansion flickered on the front page. Beneath the headline, Lost Haunt Last Haunt and the Ever After kicks the bucket. She looked up from the paper, bewildered. But what does it mean? She asked. It's true. I seen it from up yonder, Bertha growled, stepping up from one of the tunnels and dusting off her boots. Porto Town has fallen. Several spirits around the hall gasped, but Bertha looked only at at one person. May. The realm's last free city is gone. May drifted up to the doorway to the outdoors and opened it, peering outside as if she might see Porter Town crumbling in the distance. There was only empty desert. Only the faintest glimmer remained in the sky above. The last of the stars above the nothing plateau had vanished. There was no escaping it. The ever after was flickering out. As she was looking, May sensed a movement not too far across the sand. Um, she started. In a flash, she had her arrows drawn, pointing into the darkness. For several seconds, she stood there, straining her ears for the slightest sound. Behind her, the colony prepared itself, spirits racing to and fro for whatever was approaching outside. They pressed themselves against the walls, poised to fight, listening for the slightest sound that might give away who was outside. And then it came. Meow. May's arrow went clattering to May's arrow went clattering to the ground. She could just make out. She could just make out now, a few feet away, the big ears silhouetted in the starlight. She was just about to leap forward when she froze again. Somber Kitty wasn't the only figure there in the dusk. There were two mummies, their hands tied together by their own gauze, held like a leash that dangled from Somber Kitty's mouth. And there was something else. It wasn't one cat standing in the shadows, but two. The second was covered in fluff. She was gray, with a pretty fluffy face and twinkling green eyes. May blinked, disbelieving, but she would have known the face anywhere, no matter how many years had passed. Dusty and covered in sand, somebody had found its way back to May, and so had Legume. And that is the end of chapter 25. And if you remember correctly, Legume was her first cat that she had owned previous to Somber Kitty. So she has both her cats back. But I remember now, yeah, right? Legume! Okay. Yeah, I'm probably gonna finish part 2 and then we'll stop there. And then I'll probably read, hopefully I'll read all of part 3 next week. Three cats versus Cleo. Nice. Okay. Alright. Chapter 26. Yeah, chapter 26. Pumpkin and May. The days after the cat's arrival back at the colony, strangely, were some of the best May could remember having. She had never felt more capable or more in her element. She asked some North Farm spirits to work shaping bows and passed out many silver arrows as she could spare. She asked the Risk Falls spirits to make slingshots and sacks full of mini spiky ball and sacks full of mini spiky death balls for everyone who didn't have a bow. She sent the house ghosts to sewing capes for everyone at Beatrice's instruction. Everywhere, everywhere May turned, someone had a question for her about the upcoming battle, and she had almost all the answers. Goblins are especially susceptible to show tunes. The best way to shoot a silver arrow is to believe in what you are fighting for. Zombies are ruthless, but easy to confuse. The only answer she didn't have was what really waited for them beyond the plateau of despair, and and how they. I think this is another typo, or I think they were gonna say something else. It literally says, "Oh no, never mind. It's not a typo. I just didn't read further." Okay. The only answer she didn't have was what really waited for them beyond the plateau of despair, and how they, a jumbled group of about 50 spirits, would ever defeat it. The fear loomed, but something else hung above the last of the realm's free spirits. It was courage. May moved out with a spring in her step and a song in her lips, watching with a secret smile as Sombrity and Legume bounced about the tunnels of the colony like twin rubber bands, leaping out at each other from hiding places, biting each other's ears, tapping each other's faces lovingly with their paws. Somber Kitty had never looked less somber. Only occasionally would he deign to leap onto her lap. Only occasionally would he deign to leap onto her lap anymore. And when he did, May would scratch his ears and think to him, "This is what it feels like to really belong." Somber Kitty, fearful of being made into a sacred idol, studiously avoided the Egyptians, trying to make himself as inconspicuous as possible by a hold by holding his paw up to his face whenever they drifted past him. Always eager to learn something new, he had he had himself into inexplicably apprenticed himself to the North Farm spirits to learn carpentry. Whenever he could tear himself away from Legume, one would find him at the workshop, using his mouth and paws to assemble tiny wooden toys in record speed, despite his lack of opposable thumbs. As a gift for Legume, he even made a tiny rolling mouse, a replica of the one he'd seen outside the city of Ether. Uh, Legume Legume purred in admiration. Uh, each night, May, Bertha, and Lexi climbed to the colony roof and surveyed the scene below. And every night, the great shadow hand crept closer to the colony, reaching and grasping. Finally, one night, when the hand seemed only to be a few miles away, Bertha let out a smelly sigh. "Well, girls," she said, "if we're gonna go, we gotta go now." They leaned on the railings and they leaned on the railing and stayed quiet for many minutes, watching the last of the free land of the ever after slip away. That night, though she didn't know exactly why, May asked Pumpkin to cut her hair. "I never liked it, she said. "Too fussy for you," Pumpkin agreed. "Yeah," May swallowed. She nibbled her lip nervously. She had been working up to say something for many days now, and this was the perfect time to say it. Her heart fluttered with shame. "Pumpkin," she told him, "I'm sorry for what I said before during the meteor shower." "It's okay," Pumpkin said, looking down at his feet awkwardly, then sitting beside her on the bed. "It's not a big deal." "Well," May kicked her own feet in the air, back and forth. It kind of is a big deal. It was a really horrible thing for me to say. Pumpkin shrugged. It was the truth. No, it wasn't, May gushed, grabbing his cold fingers. How can you say that? Pumpkin, tugging at his crooked bottom lip thoughtfully, appeared to be unswayed. It's okay. I mean, I wish it was different, you know? He waggled one hand in the air helplessly. The spirits of Risk Falls are good at taking risks. The Egyptians are good at building. The undead are good at surviving. He hunched his shoulders forward a bit, sinking. House ghosts aren't good at much. That's just the way it is. Hold on, I think I hear something. Okay. All right. He hunched his shoulders forward a little bit, sinking. House ghosts aren't good at much. It's just the way it is. May felt a thick knot in her throat. How could she, how could she tell him how much he mattered? I don't see any other house ghosts but you, Pumpkin. Who else would have been brave enough to come this far? Even the Shakespeare Song and Dance Revue doesn't want me, he said, and sniffed. They were both silent for a while. I was good at something once, he finally said. What's that? May asked. Watching over you? He looked at her, and a tiny, sad smile played on his white lips. When you were just a baby and a little girl living in White Moss Manor, he nodded, his eyes wide and sad. I was really good at that. Pumpkin squeezed his cold hand again. But you're not a little girl anymore, I guess, he whispered. May didn't know how to answer. I'll always need you, she finally said. Please don't give up on watching over me. Another sad smile spread across Pumpkin's big mouth. But it was one that May could tell was only meant to make her feel better. Somebody had taken to sleeping on the easy chair, curled up with Legume, and so May and Pumpkin fell asleep with May's head on Pumpkin's shoulder, like two peas in the pod, like two spirits who could never be separated. And that is the end of chapter 26. Pumpkin and May. Man, I feel like crying right now. Alright. We're almost done, so yeah. I was gonna read until like 10. That's not gonna happen. I'm gonna probably start reading at like 9:30. Because that's when I'll be done with part 2. Yeah. No, I think even if you say you hate him, you love him. You you have to love Pumpkin. Pumpkin is sort of like Mariko in a way where I guess she was pretty annoying, just like and then she, but you you love her and yeah, he is. Yes, I cannot deny you that opinion. Yes, he is annoying. All right. So now we come back to chapter 27, the beginning of the end. The next day, a ragtag group of about 20 live ones and 30 spirits, some drifty, some drifty, lopsided ghosts, some somber-looking specters, a gaggle of luminously glowing boys, a dimly lit, pumpkin-headed house ghost, set off across the nothing plateau, headed northeast. They dodged in and out of abandoned villages, keeping as far from the shadowy hand of Boaklevel as they could. As they made their way farther north, several of them kept looking back toward their shoulders at the world they were leaving behind. Um, Finally, after days of traveling, they came to a place where the clear, dusky air of the world they knew met the thick fog that marked the beginning of the plateau of despair. A low moaning seemed to whisper through the air, and as if that and if that wasn't enough, a tiny green kiosk, broken and decrepit, sat at its very edge, a sign above its one window announcing, "Welcome to the Plateau of Despair. Turn back." May drifted to the kiosk. On its dingy front door was a wooden hand clutching a face full of papers, a sign above reading, "Take one." She did, the hand loosening its grip as she slid one of the papers out, and then tightening again after giving a brief thumbs up sign. "Welcome to the Plateau of Despair, final frontier for the ever after. Certain doom awaits you if you continue forward." The rest of the brochure was just black, but for a pair of red eyes at the bottom of the page. The eyes blinked at May. She shivered. Um, she glanced back at the fog. They couldn't see they couldn't see more than a couple of feet into it. May couldn't be waiting for them. May couldn't be waiting any May. Why did I say that? Okay. She glanced back at the fog. They couldn't see more than a couple of feet into they couldn't see more than a couple of feet into it. Anything could be waiting for them drifty in its white drifty depths. "It doesn't look so despairy," Beatrice offered, trying to sound bright. Pumpkin whimpered. May scanned the empty horizon behind them. as if the lady might show up after all and tell them it was safe to pass. But there was nothing. Everyone looked to May, waiting for her decision. She peered back into the plateau. Well, she said, stepping back from the kiosk and then stretching a foot into the fog. I guess we go, said Fabio, raising one finger and sweeping between her and the door with a great show of bravery. Um, Suddenly, a loud creak came from inside the kiosk, and then the door burst off its hinges, knocking Fabio onto the ground and landing on top of him with a thud, following by the thuds of several spirits falling out on top of it. I told you to stop tickling me with your mustache. I can't help if I can't help it if you've got sensitive skin. Get off me! Get off me! You're making me foot fall asleep. Mamma mia! Help me! The group of knaves lying on the ground in a knot looked up and then seemed to notice for the first time that they were making a spectacle of themselves. Gwyneth, Pegleg Petey, and some other knaves slowly stood up, brushing themselves off. Fabio scrambled out from under the door, then brushed off his uniform indignantly, then looked around surreptitiously, as if hoping no one had noticed. Gwyneth scooped her foot from the ground and stuck it in her pocket, giving Petey a death glare. May pulled her bow off her sack slowly, stringing an arrow and pointing it at the knaves. Leave us alone, she growled. Summer Kitty, trailing behind her, leaped in front of Legume protectively. The knaves, 11 in all, jumped behind Pegleg Petey, who waved his rough, calloused hands in front of his dimpled face. It's not like that, lass. We didn't come to catch ye. We came to join ye. And that ain't no way to greet a. Why am I saying this in a southern accent? And that ain't no and that ain't no way to greet a friend. Gwyneth added indignantly. May scowled at her, and she hopped back behind Petey. We've been waiting on ye 3 days, Petey explained. Course, Skippy is no longer with us. You saw the vamps nab him. He bowed his head respectfully, then continued. Lucky the rest of us are masters at hiding in even the most pressing circumstances. We figured you'd be coming up this way sooner or later. We wants to throw you in our net with you. Make a go of it. You're lying. You're lying, Lucia said. Mew! Mew! Said Kitty, agreeing completely. Petey drew circles in the dirt with his foot, sweating profusely as he looked at May's arrow. I can see as you might have a reason or two not to trust us. He stuck a finger in his nose, then wiped it on his shirt. But you see, there's nothing, no or nobody left in the ever after. We're all that's left. He swiped a tear from the corner of his eye. And I says to the others, we might as well go and help that little Maybird. Book of the Dead say she gonna save the realm and all. We'd like to have a friend like you. And you see, he pulled another. He pulled something out from under his arms and showed it to her. It was his book, How to Win Friends, Influence Specters, Have Good Manners, and Find Buried Treasure by Duke Bluebird, Esquire. Petey nodded to it. It says the best way to gain a friend is to be a friend. And you think Cleveland might have some treasure locked up too? Lucius finished. Petey hesitated, then gave May an embarrassed, gold-toothed grin. Maybe just a tad. May and the others looked at one another. Lucius shook his head, but Bee nodded hopefully. Pumpkin gazed at the shiny spectacles hanging around Petey's neck, spacing out. Fabio twirled his mustache, still wearing his most common expression, indignance. Oh, and we brought something we thought might help. Gwyneth reached into a deep sack hanging off her shoulder and pulled out two overflowing handfuls of balloons. And what in tarnation are those for? Bertha Brett Waller said, emerging from the group. Gwyneth grinned. She reached into her sack again, this time pulling out several vials of dark, oily seawater. Well, May said, gazing around the group, we're not exactly in the position to turn down help. Petey grinned and floated up to May, taking her hand and giving it a hard shake, his dimples sinking deep into his chubby cheeks. All for one and all for one and all for oneself. He squinted thoughtfully, or something like that. May replaced her bow on her back. Something like that, she replied. She peered back proudly at the spirits behind her, and then the group, containing the very last of the free spirits in the ever after, good and bad, drifted forward into the fog. And that's the end of chapter 27. Yeah, 27. Ooh, we're getting 2 more chapters until we're done with part 2. Okay. Chapter 28. The Hole in the Floor of the World. Yeah, so that was chapter 28. The Hole in the Floor in the World. La 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 la. The free spirits had been drifting for what seemed like a day or two or more. With no way to see very well, it was impossible to tell if they were drifting in the right direction. 1 or 2 hours before, they had to change course after bumping into a larger boulder, chiseled into the shape of a skull and crossbones, that they had already come across earlier in the day. It was the only landmark they'd seen. Fabio zipped far along in front of the group, cutting a commanding figure and singing an old Italian army song filled with lots of la la la's for all the words he didn't remember. His singing was almost as bad as Pumpkin's was good. Somber Kitty lying cuddled with Legume in Pumpkin's arms, let out a meow after meow, looking like his old somber self. Maybe this is what the plateau of despair means, Lucius muttered under his breath. The moan in the air, the moan in the air, very quietly, said things like left, right, left, turn, left, so that May couldn't think straight. I think that something's up ahead, May said, hopeful and a little wary of what it might be. As they got closer, the shape took a more specific form, a familiar one. A few more seconds, and it was obvious. It can't be, May thought, her stomach churning, but it was. It was the same skull and crossbones from before. There, in one corner, was a place where the rock had been chipped. It was unmistakable. We've been going around in a circle! We've been going around in a circle again! She cried. Fabio twirled his mustache and looked about, bewildered. This is not my fault, he said in a low, even voice. Pumpkin flopped down dramatically on top of the skull. Well, I'm not going any farther until someone figures out the right way. Sommerkitty sniffed curiously at the bottom edges of the rock. Lagoon looked behind his ears. Maybe the despair. But the who description of. Oh, you like the description of the. Of just thought? Oh, you just like the description that I'm reading? Right? They are great. You should use them in D&D. Yeah, you should. It's great. Okay. So, um, maybe the despair part of the plateau of despair, is that it never ends. Beatrice offered helpfully, but it didn't make anyone feel better. Dude, this is a total downer. Zero piped up from behind her. Pumpkin heaved a dramatic sigh. He was now totally splayed across the skull, his head hanging upside down. We'll never even get to fight the battle we're going to lose. They were all silent for several seconds, thinking. Meow? Everyone turned to look at Somber Kitty. Meow? 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 He flipped his tail thoughtfully, staring holes into May. Dude, I think your cat's trying to say something, Zero said. May May gazed at Kitty, then at the rock he'd been sniffing. She began to examine it. She examined every inch of it, of for any secret buttons or knobs or levers. No one ever knew. One never knew. But there was nothing. It was exactly what it appeared to be, a lifeless, dull rock. Samaki and Legume looked at each other, and May could swear they were rolling their eyes. Well, if we try heading this way, she suggested, pointing to a random direction in the fog. Meow! She looked at Kitty again. He made a big show of sniffing the rock. May leaned with one hip and gazed at it, trying to see it in a different way. When she'd been smaller and working on her inventions, the best way to come up with something new was to let her thinkings go sideways. She tried that now. Skull and crossbones, she thought, remembering old treasure maps she had read about in stories. By this time, somebody began to make big arrows in the sand with his paw, all pointing to that boulder. Maybe this is what happens when you reach the northern edge of the realm, Lucius suggested. You just keep pushing towards somewhere, but you just don't go anywhere. Pushing, May thought. Push, she said. Huh? Asked Pumpkin, lifting his head from its flopped back position. Push the rock. Yes, push the rock. Let's try pushing the rock. There's got to be something hidden underneath. Maybe a map or something. I don't know. Everyone looked dubious. Um, but they gathered on one side of the boulder, and Pumpkin leaped off, and on the count of three, they gave a great heave. At first, nothing happened, but then the boulder slowly began to move, and slowly what lay underneath revealed itself. Keep pushing, May breathed. With one final heave, the boulder moved completely out of the way, and everyone fell back, panting and staring at the ground. What lay there was a giant hole, dark and deep, but flickering with white light. Summer Kitty and Legume let out loud hisses. Several spirits knelt down beside it and peered inside, amazed into silence. May crouched, leaned forward onto her fists, and looked down. The hole was in the sky. The hole was in the sky, or rather, the hole led to the the hole led to the air, led into the air. They were all looking down through a thin crust of land into a wide open valley below, as if they were looking down on the world from the clouds. Oh, okay. It's a rock. It's a rock. Hell yeah. All right. Let me just drink some water. read that again because I didn't really understand what I was reading, and now I understand now. The hole was in the sky, or rather, the hole led into the air. They were looking down through a thin crest of land into a wide open valley below, as if they were looking down on the world from the clouds. But the world wasn't like the ever after, dim and dusky. May had seen it before. She had seen it painted in the glass of the great uppermost hall of the eternal edifice, and she'd seen it in her mind a million times since, but she still wasn't prepared for the sight. It wasn't like anything she had ever imagined. The dark sky flashed with thunder and lightning. Rocky mountains rose up in all directions, glinting darkly. One peak sweeping to to within 20 once one peak sweeping to within 20 feet below where they were crouched. Um, a deep, a deep wide crevice bit its way between them, far below May and her friends. The spanning of the crevice was what looked at first like a stone castle, straight from from a storybook. Hold on, I need to read this again because I'm not paying attention. All right. The dark sky flashed with thunder and lightning. Rocky mountains rose up in all directions, glinting darkly. Glinting darkly. One peak sweeping to within 20 feet where they were crouched. A deep, a deep wide crevice bit its way between them, far below May and her friends. And spanning the crevice was what first looked like a stone castle straight from a storybook. Pitch as black. No, black as pitch. Its dark spires reaching into the sky. Yeah, its dark spires reaching into the sky. Its windows flickering with yellow light. But as May looked closer, she could see that the castle wasn't stone at all. It was carved out of an enormous tree stump, as tall as the eternal edifice itself, rotten and decayed, full of holes that had been turned into windows, cracks that had become doors, and at the very top, in the farthest stretch of its highest height, was one window far above all the others, glowing, not with yellow light, but an eerie red glow, a glow the co- a glow the color of Bo Clevel's eyes. Dude, it's like Dracula's castle, only Zero snatched his head, like a million times bigger and worse, and Beatrice nudged him. Pumpkin had begun to shake violently, whimpering. Hold on. In the busy streets that wound and crisscrossed down the mountainside toward the castle, they could make out moving figures, and these separated themselves out into spirits, hundreds of thousands of them, many of them in chains. It looks like every spirit it looks like every spirit in the realm is here, May whispered. hope surging within her. They're still okay. Among the spirits moved darker ones, poking, prodding her, poking, prodding, hurting. Dark spirits. Somebody let out a low groan and looked at Legume protectively. Suddenly, a great blotch swooped. Suddenly, a great splotch swooped underneath them, making them all duck backward. When they crept forward again, they could see they could see there were several dark figures circling the air, vampires keeping watch. May eyed the rope tied to peg like Petey's belt. She looked down at the distance between the hole and the peak below. Then she began untying the rope and wrapping it around the skull-shaped boulder. Wait. Yeah. What are you doing? What are you doing? We're going to lower ourselves down, May said, making a knot and testing to see if it was solid. You can't be serious about going in there. Petey warbled, backing up. May peered around at all the faces surrounding her. Yeah, May peered around all the faces surrounding her. Each face seemed to ask the same thing. I, Bertha said, sucking in her teeth nervously. Do you wonder if we might not be ready to do this, honey? May, shocked, felt her resolution falter. She studied the free spirits. Even the colony of the undead looked petrified. She peered down into the hole again, at the fearsome future that awaited them if they chose to face it. Maybe they were right. Maybe they weren't ready. But the question was, if not now, when? Time had run out. We're ready, she said, nodding, hoping she looked determined, but trembling inside. If she couldn't give them courage for what they had to face, no one would. It was their only chance. We can do this. I know we can. Without letting herself hesitate a moment, she lowered the rope into the world below, tugged on it hard to test it one more time, and looked around the circle. We're going down there. The only question is, who's going down first? There was a moment of silence, and then someone moved forward. Samakadi crept up to the edge of the hole, his entire body trembling. Meow, he said, his voice disappearing into the blackness below. And then he did the last thing any of them expected. He turned and ran. May shut up. Kitty! In a flash, Legume had leaped up after him, and both cats raced into the distance, fading into the fog. The last thing May saw of her cat was his tail waving behind him, and then he was gone. And that is the end of chapter 28. 28. Summer Kitty! Alright, and the last chapter Well, not well. The last chapter of the part two. No, if it was the last chapter, I think I'd been crying by now. Which I feel like I might cry, like dead ass. I might cry when I'm reading the last part. I might. Okay. All right. Now this is where my voice is starting to fuck up, but it's okay because this is only five pages. All right. Chapter 29. A warrior princess. On the Rocky Mountains above Bo Clevel's castle, the spirits painted each other with glowing war paint, so they all looked like skeletons, even the ones who were already skeletons. It had been Pumpkin's idea. He had always had a flair for the dramatic. They stayed up the whole night. The knaves gathered in a rowdy circle, passing around a bottle of That's the Spirit spirits and swapping tales of the greatest heists. The falsers, um, drumming on bongos and singing hula songs. The luminous boys playing hide and seek among the crevices, giggling and cheating. May sat off a ways, on a rock on a quiet spot, overlooking the castle below. Sorry. Sitting in the dark, she could hear Lucius's laughter and Fabio's booming voice. She wondered where Samurti was right now and if he was okay. She stared at the castle in the distance below, at the glowing red light of Bo Clevel's room way up top, and wondered about him. What was he doing now? May imagined that the spot at the top of his castle had to be the loneliest spot in the world. Worse than any kind of lonely she had ever been. Though, right now, that was hard to imagine. Hey, May started. Pumpkin's ghastly big head poked around a rock in front of her. Goalie gum for your thoughts? Pumpkin held out a pack of goalie gum, but May waved it off. No thanks. He floated over and sat down next to her, plucking at the pebbles on the rocky ground, then looked at her, feeling Pumpkin's eyes on her. May's lips started to tremble, and seeing that, his did too. She looked away, up at the dear yellow flop on top of his head. Then a loud, gabbling sound drew their attention downward. A horde of dark splotches was moving out of the castle gates, spreading upward into the mountains of the south. It looked like thousands of spirits scattered to the four winds. Oh, wait. A horde of dark splotches was moving out of the castle gates, spreading upward into the mountains of the south. Spreading downward into the mountains to the south. It looked like thousands of dark spirits scattering to the four winds. May's insides began to flutter with fear. They must be leaving for the Clevelvilles. They must be leaving for the Clevelvilles, Pumpkin said, expressing what she was already afraid of. Afraid but not surprised. She thought of Earth, of all the people she knew. Claire and the lady who ran the thrift shop in Droopview, and Sister Christopher, and of course, most especially, her mom. They were depending on her now. They were depending on her now, too. It was almost enough to make May crumble up like a piece of paper. But she didn't crumple. She stood. You look like someone I saw once. Pumpkin said. May looked down at herself, with her death shroud, her glowing bathing suit, and her painted skin. She imagined she was the very picture of the girl who had been stained. She imagined she was the very picture of the girl they had seen in the stained glass at the eternal edifice. She imagined she was the very picture of the girl who had been in the caves underneath the petrified pass. She imagined she looked like a warrior princess. As the group of as the group on the mountain quickly readied themselves to depart, there was a final burst of emotion. Peg-led Patty admitted to Guillotine Gwyneth that he had always had a crush on her, at which admission she scowled and tried to shoot him with seawater, which had Petey ducking and hiding for his life. Fabio confessed that he sometimes cheated at Uno, which everyone already knew. Lawless Lexi, claiming she had been meaning to give Bertha something for a long time, handed her a long, thin box wrapped in fuchsia. Fuchsia. I feel like that's the appropriate response. What? The crush? Admitting your love for someone? And them trying to send you to the underworld? Is that what you mean as an appropriate response? Shooting him. I mean, I guess. But, like, if you told me before we started dating that you liked me and I tried to shoot you, we wouldn't be here right now. So I don't think that's the appropriate response. Unless you would like me to shoot you. Would you like me to shoot you with the paintball gun? Because I will do that. Yeah, but Pete's an asshole. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Petey is an asshole. Okay. Lawless Lexi claimed she had been meaning to give Bertha something for a long time. Handed her a long, thin box wrapped in fuchsia. Bertha unwrapped it eagerly, then stared at the gift, bewildered to find a solitary white toothbrush. Lexi wiped a tear from her eye. Use it, she said. Please. Several Egyptians burst into tears. Zero planted a kiss on Beatrice's cheek, making her turn bright red. Fabio hugged a skeleton to his breast, claiming, I tell you what I tell my men in the Alps. We're gonna be okay. The skeleton did not look very reassured, considering that Fabio's men had died of frostbite. Lucius drifted up to May and stared at her, then at the ground, kicking his feet. He looked at her for a long while, and May's ears went itchy, wondering what he was getting at. But finally, he only thrust out his hand and pinched her arm. Ow! She squeaked, finally grabbing the spot where he'd pinched and watching him float away. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Bertha. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Bertha blowing into her cupped hand and smelling it, still looking bewildered. There's a final rush of hugs, and the last spirit May found herself standing face to face with was Pumpkin. They looked at each other for a long moment. Pumpkin smiled a crooked smile. If we don't come through, Pumpkin began. If we don't come through, May said, thank you for being my best friend, Pumpkin. Pumpkin's lips began to tremble, and he couldn't say anything at all. May folded herself into his long, gangly arms and held him tight. I love you very much, she whispered. I love you too, Pumpkin said, pulling away and wiping a tear from his eye. It was funny, looking at him now. May couldn't imagine ever having been scared of him at all. They pulled on their capes and picked up the chains they had brought. They pulled on their capes and picked up the chains they had bought, following a plan they had reviewed one last time the night before. They chained themselves to one another in long rows, just like the spirits below. They readied their two mummy captives, repeating their threats to unravel them if they didn't cooperate. And then they began to trek down the mountain. They were spotted long before they reached the valley floor. One vampire began to circle above them, and the others followed, like vultures. The gates loomed ahead, etched with screaming skulls that let out howls when they saw the spirits approaching. May reached back behind her and held Pumpkin's long, trembling fingers under her cloak. I could see it floating away. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that too. After he pinched her, he's just like, get ripped. Yeah. May reached back behind her and held Pumpkin's long, trembling fingers under her cloak. And then, with a great creak, the gates began to open. That night, on Earth, Claire Arnerson had a sleepover, complete with cheerful chatter, popcorn, and scary movies. Bridie McDrummy closed the Droop Mountain shop and spend 5 minutes early to sneak off with her boyfriend. Weather forecasters in 12 states predicted cloudy skies. Presidents and prime ministers in the Western Hemisphere laid down their heads but couldn't sleep, worried over politics. People in Hong Kong hit the snooze buttons on their alarm clocks, reluctant to go to work. In Brewery Swamp, West Virginia, Ellen Bird spent another night lying awake with the lights on, lost in grief. The ground was broken all for a new mall in White Sulphur Springs, 5 towns away, by men working the night shift. The people on Earth, full of their own worries, joys, cares, and hopes, had no idea what was on its way. They went about their business, laughing, crying, talking, sleeping, dancing, worrying, living. Only the crickets and the trees sensed the danger in the air, flowing with the night breeze, whispering down from the stars, flowing with the night breeze, whispering down from the stars, and feared. And that is the end of chapter 29 and the end of part 2. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. Oh, I almost made it to 4 hours. To 3 hours. Look at that. Beautiful. I knew it was going to take that long, but not that long. Alright, anyways. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. Bye-bye.